Welcome to day 2 of the 2022 SMART4SEA Forum. We had the full program yesterday with a set of panels talking about Shipping 4, talking about game changer technologies in cybersecurity, and of course we had the SMART4SEA Awards. So congratulations to all the shortlisted nominees and of course all the winners for the awards we had yesterday, and we have posted the actual outcome of the awards on the site today. Today, our program consists of a couple of panels and a set of presentations. We have a panel commencing now on e-navigation and the future of maritime safety, and we have a second panel to conclude the day. Of course, we have a set of presentations, and we have a second panel to conclude the day on human factors in the smart shipping era. Today, we are focusing on safety and human factors. Now, in this panel, we would like to talk about the progress made in the smart shipping towards e-navigation. E-navigation may be a controversial subject. Some of the industry insiders insist that it's a plus assisting operations. Others, let's say, discussing about the challenges from the human perspective, and maybe a little bit difficult to accept all this path to autonomous systems and autonomous ships and so on and so forth. We've seen the application of ECDIS over the last years. It's been a long road. I think the road started approximately 30 years ago with the discussions on the IMO level and so on and so forth, till we have it on board ships, and now we have a mature industry using ECDIS. And of course, we'll discuss along the challenges posed by the pandemic and modern ships and smart shipping in general. So we would like to discuss autonomous, we would like to discuss e-navigation training, we'd like to discuss the training challenges, and any sort of human factors and issues surrounding e-navigation and maritime safety in general. So to have this discussion today, we have assembled a panel of experts. Let me introduce them to you. We have Marvin Bielek, who is the nautical author with Mintra. We have Captain John Dolan, who is a Deputy Director of Loss Prevention with the Startup Club. We have Bjørn Åge Hjøllo, who is the Chief Sustainability Officer with NAVTOR. We have Captain Dimitrios Melas, who is Master with the Angelicoussis group. And last but not least, we have Captain Pantelis Patsulis, who is the Vetting and Nautical Manager with Euronav. Gentlemen, I would like to welcome you all into this panel. And I would like to start our discussion with the first topic I would like to discuss. I would like to ask you, from your lens, from your position, from what you see, the impact that we have seen from the pandemic to e-navigation and possibly maritime safety. What are your, let's say, concerns, and what have you seen so far? Starting with Captain John.
Good morning, all. Well, that's a very interesting question to kick off, Pastoris. It's always a challenge to open, and also for such a big issue to address a very short period. The pandemic has had an impact right across the shipping industry, no doubt. And its impact has been primarily on the human element on board, the crew issues of repatriation in timely movements of crews in extraordinary difficult circumstances. I'm not sure that it has had a great deal of impact on e-navigation as a subject area, other than that the fact that the crew on board and the morale and their performances has definitely been impacted, and that's something we're well aware of in the Standard Club. So I'm going to be a little bit controversial at this point and say, no, not a great deal of impact on the e-navigation, but certainly has an enormous impact on the efficiency of the shipping industry, in our opinion.
Okay, Bjørn, your thoughts. You are providing, systems. What are your thoughts, and what's your feedback? What you've seen in the market so far? Bjørn, we cannot hear you.
From a pure e-navigation side, since NAVTOR is in the e-navigation business and has been there all the time, we haven't in fact seen so much impact. I can agree with that. Since e-navigation has become very digital over the years, we had already all the system up running. We have the platform up running. So it's not a big issue for us technically wise. However, of course, we are cut off from the main input, from the market, from the ship owner, from the crew. So probably it's given us a kind of break on our innovation side, because we need this continuous dialogue with our user to be leading on this race. But business-wise, we haven't seen a big impact, in fact.
Okay, now let's hear from the horse's mouth, let's say. Captain Pantelis is joining us, and it seems like he's on board the ship. So, Captain Pantelis, your thought.
With my back, yes, on the navigational side. Listen, I would agree with John. We can't connect it directly with the e-navigation, with the impact that the pandemic has on the seafarers. But for sure, it has affected the well-being and their morale, which consequently might affect the bridge, the effectiveness of the bridge team, the situational awareness, and so forth. So from that aspect, yes, it does. It has affected our seafarers, but nothing additional to what is required to be a level of competence from their side, and all the trainings which should have been conducted prior to their embarkation, these are still being done, and still the trainings and familiarization on board, these are still being continued. It's mainly on the moral and on the human element and the well-being, which is affecting their performance. This is
right. Thank you very much. And Captain Dimitrios, your thoughts? A second captain with us today. What are your thoughts?
Hello to everyone. I will totally agree with all the gentlemen, and I think that what the pandemic did, it's that it benefits this industry behind the navigation benefits right now, because we also, and we are still see that the last 2 years we have a lot of problems with the crews and with the disembarkations and the repatriations. So this is an asset for them, because they can rely on it, and they can say that, yes, now it's the time to boost a little bit the industry, because now we have the pandemic, the COVID, in a few years maybe we have something else. But of course, it's creating a lot of problems between the feedback that the makers need from the seamen, because as the former Secretary General said, this should be user needs led and not led by regulators. So we need the feedback from the crew members, and the pandemic causes a problem right now.
Yeah. And last, let's hear from Marvin. Marvin, you are providing training services. What are your thoughts with respect to e-navigation, possibly on the human element side, specifically with the training and the provision of all these, familiarization and training sessions?
I can only agree with the previous speakers that I think thanks to e-navigation, the effect of COVID was actually lessened on navigation. If you imagine the problems that we had now with logistical difficulties, back 10 years, 15 years ago, when you needed to have paper charts, etc., all these updates also sent per post to the vessels, it would have had a much larger impact on navigation. Thanks to the current state of e-navigation, it could actually be lessened a little bit. However, on the other hand, there are several studies, experiences, etc., that e-navigation increases the complexity on the bridge, which adds to the workload of specifically bridge officers, which of course then, if we said about the human element, which makes it a little bit harder because they have a more complex job. Maybe they are on a dual vessel, they need to update the act, they send the paper chart, etc. They have a lot of stuff to learn. And all this together with the effects of COVID, of course, has a harder strain on the officers. Especially now if they were maybe scheduled for classroom training, which they couldn't manage before. That means they need to find an alternative for training to still fulfill the regulations, maybe do the same thing while they are already on board, dealing with all the other things, knowing that they are on board with other officers that are maybe already behind their contract period, etc. So definitely the main focus here is on the human element. And I think now after 2 years, we found a lot of solutions to give effective training and to make sure that people are trained before they come on board, even now.
Okay. Now, I would like to ask you, because we have to, let's say, dive in, I would like to ask you from your perspective, what are the main challenges to navigation from where we are today and where the industry will go in the near future? So what are the challenges that tops, let's say, your concerns, your agenda? Captain John, your thoughts? Because we have to map these challenges to discuss them.
Indeed, it's a very, very complex area, and there is no doubt that the technology is available and has been available for a long time. So technically it is possible. And I think economically feasible as well. Yes, it can be made to work, and I'm sure there are many people out there who are considering it. But the broader impact, the broader inhibition to its adoption, I think, is a societal one, a legal one. I'm not sure there is the will and the understanding and agreement to underpin it, a broad adoption of autonomous shipping and its ancillary services just yet. But technically it can be done and is available right now, Apostolos, and is almost certainly going to continue, but not necessarily at a great step change pace, but more as an iterative process.
Okay. Bjørn, your thoughts?
Yes. Yeah, again, from our perspective, then within the e-navigation industry, we have seen that many of the original challenges stated in the original IMO plan with a strategic implementation plan and the solution that we could impose on, for instance, integration of information on board and automatic reporting. This is challenges that we have worked with for 10 years. And from my point, they are from the provider side, from the industry side, solved most of them. We have very nice systems now, many providers on board doing the integration, easily to take them into account when you do your monitoring and decisions. All the information are mixed and reused into the passage plan, for instance, that is automatically printed out. And you have layer and layer of information. The paper chart could be taken away. Most of the publication can be taken away. So a lot of them is already in place. And the same is the case for automatic reporting, where we have done trials for maritime safety window. So my answer is that we are waiting now on the shore side. We are waiting on standardization for doing the reporting. We are waiting for IMO and YALA to come together, for instance, to use the IMO reference model. So we can easily make ship shore reporting. So the industry has done a great job. There is a lot to do, but then we are going over to the next phase of e-navigation, the sustainability part. So I guess we will coming back to that one. But the basic things from the strategic implementation plan is more or less in place.
Okay. May I ask, because the topic of standardization, I think, is in the foundation of the industry, and we are lacking a number of standards, speaking in general. If we, let's say, pick the topic, for example, pick the topic of autonomous shipping, we don't have any standards at all. If we go to other issues, like, for example, the navigation specifically, a lot of work has been done, but as you correctly said, a lot of work has to be done, and there's an ongoing work on a number of groups, Ayala and others, and the IMO level, etc. And we see how it goes. I would like to ask, are you happy with the progress made so far with respect to standardization and navigation? I mean, should we have done more, let's say, going back 5 or 10 years ago? And that could be a lesson to be learned in other topics. What are your thoughts about that?
You're asking me?
Yes,
Or,
yes.
yes.
Your thoughts about that specifically.
No, I agree on your fundament here, because we see that we can do from the industry side, we can solve a lot of the technical point of this. We can make it, if you have a passage plan, we can automatically do ship reporting. And if we are using the IMO reference model, for instance, which we have tested with the Norwegian Coastal Administration as a maritime single window, it works. It works from all NAVTOR ships, in fact, now. So we are missing that this standard is implemented in other authorities, by other ports, by the VTS. If so, all the NAVTOR vessel, and I'm sure many others as well, could pick up and do this reporting. So the standardization is too late, basically. The standardization is now slowing down e-navigation.
Okay. All right. Captain Pantelis, your thoughts with respect to key challenges you see within navigation?
Yes. I believe that e-navigation is a milestone for a navigational, from a navigational perspective. When it is used correctly, it is well known that it provides, that it reduces the workload and it increases the situational awareness. However, from the other hand, negligible actions, setting up the systems, the EGDIS prior to departure, would pose the vessel and the ship owner in a position being liable and unseaworthy. We have seen this in the recent Libra case, where a defective passage plan rendered the vessel unseaworthy. So we can understand that an effective training and the practical expertise is a necessity from our seafarers. There is something that they should be fully compliant with, and also implement all the requirements prior to the vessels departing from port. I do believe that a uniformity is required from any maker in order for the seafarers to be able to use the equipment more effectively, and going from one vessel to another, being successful to having a successful bridge watch.
Okay, I have a follow-up question, but I would like to hear from Captain Dimitrios before I come back to both of you with a follow-up question. Captain Dimitrios, your thoughts?
In my opinion, in order for this challenge to find its, its target, it needs to overcome a lot of challenges and a lot of barriers. So this will happen very, very gradually. And we need to adapt the legislation. We need all of us to adapt, and of course to modify the legislation. This is the most important. And we need to find a way for autonomous ships to coexist with the rest of the ships, because we cannot pass from autonomous shipping in a moment. We need time. So of course legislation is a big issue, and we delayed because I think we didn't have the technology, the technological advancements to modify the legislation. So we need time, and we need a lot of challenges to overcome. This is my opinion.
Okay, Bjørn, you would like to comment?
Yeah, it was partly mentioned now, but first to Captain Pantelis, the harmonization is very important, so the crew can use different systems. But one should be careful with standardization of UI. So that is what happened with the EGDIS system. It's good with standardization because you can use any equipment from any provider. However, the innovation, the adaptation of human factor, making it simpler, the kind of development will be slowed down because it takes a long time to change a standardized solution. When it comes to autonomous vessel, I really believe in that in the longer term, but one have to ask, I think, why are we looking for these autonomous vessels? Autonomous means that they are self-steering, they can do it themselves. However, why should we aim for that? It has to be some kind of the bigger picture. Do they solve some of the main challenges in the world today? For instance, will the vessel be safer? Will the vessel be more sustainable? Will they comply better to lower cost that is wanted? So I don't think the final goal I agree with, but I wouldn't say that we are in a hurry to reach autonomous vessels. One should think that maybe crew-reduced vessel, maybe a vessel with one crew, a vessel that is automated, and that we develop this automation step by step in our vision of mass vessel. So one has to take one step and harvest the benefit as we go. There are so many obstacles, big obstacles with autonomous vessels related to fail-safe, cost of duplicated systems, but also maintenance, that is mentioned quite often. And also, what about firefighting? We have vessels now sailing with taking fire. Would that happen more frequent with autonomous vessels? So the cost of a crew, I think, for shorter distance, we will see autonomous vessels. But for those doing crossings for weeks, 2 or 3 weeks, it will be very difficult.
That's okay. We'll come back to that. I would like to ask both Captain Pantelis and Captain Dimitrios, both of you, you are working in top-tier operators, operating new buildings. I would like to ask you, very modern ships, state-of-the-art. I would like to ask you, are you happy with the integration? Because you're using too many systems, especially on the bridge. Are you happy with the integration so far? Because this is one of the challenges, because systems do not necessarily talk smoothly to each other, and integration is a key issue from what we've seen so far. Are you happy with integration? And what are your thoughts toward, operating safer ships, meaning speaking smoothly within these systems? Because I think there are lessons to be learned there for all of us across the industry. Captain Pantelis, your thoughts?
Yes, I believe that we should move closer to a bridge-centered design and be more realistic to how the bridges are manned in our days, in order to be a more human-centered design. The ergonomic of the bridge equipment is very vital to the performance of the bridge team members. And the current IMO regulations and requirements need to be updated in order to have a better and a more efficient bridge team on board.
Okay, Captain Dimitrios, your thoughts?
Of course, when the first vessel entered the fleet, of course, it was the experimental vessel. We all learned from that, and we had a lot of problems. But with continuous feedback, we managed to adjust the next deliveries, and of course, to modify. This is what always happens when a new system is released. But we all know that seafarers are now, they are transformed from deckhands and navigators to operators interacting with complex technology. In my opinion, okay, we have the means, we have the technological advancements, but what we will do with the human element, because the new generations are very familiar with electronic aids. We all know that, we all have kids. And this causes, I think, brain laziness. They are becoming lethargic, they over-rely. And that's what the statistics indicate when we have, you know, some alarming trends. So it's a combination of technology and how the human element reacts to that.
Okay, Marvin, your thoughts, what are the challenges? You have to provide, you know, training for several systems. And what are your thoughts? What are the challenges from your perspective that you see within navigation and the training that you have to provide towards that?
One of the challenges definitely is the rapid pace of technology development. What Bjørn said, I mean, the development of the technology itself is usually much faster than of the legislative framework or actually of applying it on board. And for us as a training provider, of course, we need to stay on top of that to ensure that people are actually trained on the new versions, on what they will find on the ships. If we do an ISPS training, it's pretty much the same as it was 20 years ago when it came into force. But e-navigation trainings, they need to be constantly revised, and they cannot be standalone anymore. ISPS is a standalone topic. You deal with that for the security of the vessel, but ACTIS is not standalone, radar is not standalone. All of that needs to be seen in the context of the bridge, which makes it very, very difficult, because on the one hand, you want to create specific trainings for specific needs. On the other hand, it all plays together. And if people only have an ACTIS training, they might see it as a single equipment, it's a single point of failure, and it might lead to over-reliance because they don't see it in the context of the bridge, they don't see it in the context of traditional navigation. So getting this kind of mindset, how things work together, of the full mission bridge, is one of the biggest challenges I see with e-navigation, together with, of course, keeping training up to date and keeping seafarers competent on the new things.
Okay, Captain John, as a second take, from the club's perspective, what sort of challenges you see towards, you know, this integration and the operation of people in these, you know, modern systems on board with a bridge? What are your thoughts?
It's a very interesting discussion. Wide-ranging from the broader issue of e-navigation, you know, at the IMO level, right down to the shipboard level, and the officer watch standing on the bridge and the equipment that's in front of him or her. I minded, Apostolos, in reply to your answer, or to answer you, there was a very interesting graphic put out by the IMRS a few years ago talking about the evolution of technology, and it made reference to the fact that vessels had moved away from the conventional vessel where, you know, STCW type training would be sufficient to an environment that was more complicated, where you had now the masters and chief engineers having to be at least 10 years in the job and have a good command of the systems on board to be absolutely confident, and now had moved away almost to a post-complicated to a complex area where systems on board were so integrated and so sophisticated that emergent behavior would catch people out, and that no one person could be fully knowledgeable or expert in the system, that it would have collective effort on board. Well, I think from the club's perspective, that's where we see technology leading the industry. And it is important. It's why it's very valuable for me now to sit here and listen to users who have this cutting edge technology on their ships and to hear how they're responding. No doubt from our club's perspective, traditional skills, the traditional watchkeeping skills are still very necessary in even the most complex of environments to keep people sharp, aware, alert to the systems on board. But no doubt, Apostolos, we're very conscious that there are challenges and will continue to be big challenges with this evolutionary process.
May I ask, Captain John, Do you see any sort of interrelation between, challenges and size of ships specifically? Because there are a number of challenges associated with ships being bigger and bigger on a daily basis. Do you see any? And of course, they're not only getting bigger, they're getting smarter as well. And
Indeed.
They also integrate latest technology. And as we increase the layers, correctly pointed out by Bjørn earlier on, as we add these layers of complexity and technology and a number of vendors, it makes it a little bit more difficult due to the lack of standardization, let's say, between the systems to operate smoothly. And in that way, as we heard from Captain Pantelis, and I think we all agree with that, the user interface and the interface that the operator, the seafarer that has on the bridge, makes a lot of sense at the end of the day, because we expect people to operate systems. Do you see any sort of relationship between these ships that are getting bigger and more smarter with the challenges to navigation?
I certainly do, Apostolos, and it's probably misleading to talk about ships in general. With the specific ship types that have particular risk factors associated with them due to size, and one of the more familiar and painful experiences that we have as a marine insurer is witnessing the number of gantry cranes being knocked over by container vessels on a fairly regular basis. And that is, of course, a number of issues at play there, but one of them surely is size, weather conditions, complexity, just the sheer momentum, berth designs. So all of these risk factors could and probably should lead to the use of more sensors on board vessels, more smart technology to guide the mariners on the bridge. If you're standing on a very large container vessel 30 meters above the waterline, approaching a berth at 0.3 of a knot, which is just very, very, very slow walking speed, you're so far removed from the movement as to be almost imperceptible. At that point, surely has to be a role for clever technology to guide the mariners in a better way. My background was tankers many, many years ago, and I remember seeing when Doppler logs came in, these were regarded as fantastic evolution at that point. Of course, the world has moved on, but we still have large ships crashing into berths, container side and on the tanker side. That should never happen. So yes, there is more use for and more role to play for technology in those kind of situations.
Okay. Bjørn, from your experience with your clients, any sort of relationship between, larger ships and challenges using your systems and to navigation in general?
Yeah, I can just comment on Captain John's final word here about these large vessels having damage when they are going very, very slowly to the berth. So we made, in fact, based on input from a large ship owner, a kind of handheld nav station where we put on board the vessel, and we could see the real size of the vessel and how it moves into the berth, where you have then distances updated in several times every second to keep an eye on what is going and the speed on it. So again, we have a lot of system that can be developed, but as I started, that is what we have missed now during the COVID. We haven't been talking with the crew, with the ship owner. But for instance, that particular challenge is in fact quite easy to solve by having it's a copy of the same equipment that is on board. It's a copy of the ECDIS that you bring on the wing or on board to do this smoother berthing. So again, I think this the e-navigation is quite mature now. We have a lot of technology. We have platforms on board many vessels. It's easy to extend it into other challenges that arise as well. But then we need to talk with each other in more frequent.
Marvin, you would like to comment?
Definitely what Bjørn mentions, I think, can be a great help to people, especially operating larger vessels. However, it's also tool that is not the core function of the ACTIS. It's something that many users are still to this date not too familiar with, because they know the core function, they know how to adjust the safety control, etc. But how to use the specific additional tools for ship handling, for berthing, etc. It's still a challenge to get people to fully understand the capacity of the tools and how to integrate them in their workflow. So while from the technology side, they are definitely very useful, especially for the larger vessels, it's very important to not lose the connections to the officer, or specifically the captains, how to use these tools and how to integrate them into their processes.
Thank you. Captain Pantelis, given the experience you have with your crews and of course your own experience, what sort of challenges or interrelation you see between these, ships getting bigger and bigger and in navigation?
Yes, Pantelis. I don't know if it's purely connected to the size of the ship. I would put in the equation the speed, the maneuverability of the vessels, the berths that they need to call to. This is on a risk-based approach. This would I would feel that this would hide more dangers and they would require extra situational awareness by the crews and avoidance of complacency. This is what I believe would have a higher, let's say, level of importance. The whole picture of the maneuverability of the vessel, the speed, if they are laden, making a full risk, let's say, based approach on the issue.
Yeah, thank you, Captain Pantelis. Captain Dimitrios, your thoughts?
I will totally agree with Captain Pantelis. I don't think it has to do so much with the size. My concern is that we have technological advances, we introduce them on board. And what is the problem? The problem is that all these advancements are have been created in order to increase safety, correct? Correct, we will all agree on that. But if you, if you check the radar's example, the radar was introduced after World War II to increase the safety, but also created vulnerabilities, because what it did, it was to enable vessels to sail through crowded areas faster. So we need a balance on that. It's not only technological advancements that will lead to the avoidance of accidents. It's how we react on them and how we treat them. Also, it's the human behavior, again, that we need to consider.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Now, I would like to discuss about the future now. I would like to ask you, where do you see the industry within the next, let's say, 8 to 10 years, let's say by 2030, to be in way of autonomous shipping? And remember, we have ships, we have ports, we have traffic control systems. Do you see by 2030? Captain John, your thoughts?
Well, it's a crystal ball in this game can be can be a very dangerous thing to look into. I do think that the role of technology development is inexorable. It will continue and perhaps even gather pace. The pandemic has been, as Bjørn said, probably a hiccup in that evolution, but it will continue. I think that there will be more. I suppose integration between ship and shore in terms of optimization of voyages. That'll be driven by just the technology available, but also, the decarbonization debates and the digitalization debates that are going on right now in and around the shipping and logistics industry. I think that crew training will change. Hopefully, will change more rapidly insofar as technology seems to be in advance of the competency trainings of the mariners on board. I think there's a gap there that needs to be bridged and crew to be ahead of that particular curve. Ship size, I think will continue to grow in certain vessel classes, and that will have an impact on what happens in those sectors as well. But overall, I think it will be more of the same, Apostolos. In fact, we've had this conversation in the past. There is no economic replacement for bulk shipping. It's going to be around for quite some time, and therefore, what we're going to see is just a change, an iterative change of what we have today, rather than any grand ship design that's going to be completely a disruptor. That's my view, Apostolos.
Yeah. Bjørn, your thoughts. Where do you see the industry to be, let's say, in a state of readiness with respect to autonomous by 2030?
By my experience of this, and then pointing on regulation side, there will be no big scale autonomous vessels out there. The regulation will take many years, maybe a decade, and then you need to harmonize it all over the world. So it may be technology-wise we can be there, but regulation-wise it won't be there. And my first question when we started is, why should we go for the autonomous vessel? Cost-wise, I think it will be much more costly, even if you have some gains as well. But there are some obstacles, as I mentioned before, that is quite hard to overcome. But regulation, I guess, and cost is the most one. But then, everyone, that the main focus of the shipping industry now is the sustainability. It's the focus of the world, so to say, and shipping has to follow up. So that is where we will see most efforts going, both on the technology side and in the shipping side. And even if you would like to build autonomous vessels, the yards are busy now. And those who will be treated first and have first priority is vessel being more sustainable. So to be honest, I don't see a big demand for autonomous vessels. For short sea, yes, but for the world fleet, I don't believe so much. But the automation will be very nice to have on board a vessel with crew.
Okay, let's hear from the captains. Captain Pantelis, your thoughts? I'm sure I will have a couple of follow-up questions for both you and Captain Dimitrios. Your initial thoughts. Where do you see the industry to be by 2030, let's say?
First of all, I agree with what has been said. Further to this, it is well known that the autonomous does not mean completely unmanned. Various levels of autonomy have been identified depending on the level. Of course, the concept is not new. We are running ships in unmanned engine rooms. We are running unmanned engine rooms as we speak. And the technological accomplishments are already there. However, from a navigational aspect, there are apparent safety concerns. Abnormal conditions and situations cannot be dealt by the same way from a remote operator or with the absence of a physical presence of a navigator. So all this will require once again a risk-based approach. According to my opinion, it will be gradual and it will take more than a decade. And there, of course, as it has already been mentioned, there are increased costs involved, redundancy of equipment, and the various legal implications which will need to be clearly clarified prior to any of this. And once again, we are talking about normal situations, and I'm very on what would happen when an intervention will be required, when we have bad weather, when we have fog, when we have situations like this, when we don't quite have the technological achievements yet. These are my...
Okay. Captain Dimitrios, your thoughts?
Apostolos, I will answer your question with another question. When technology becomes the master, do we navigate faster to disaster? This is what I am asking. So I think this is a very complex development. In my opinion, is still in embryonic stage. Okay, we have already 2-3 autonomous ships and maybe some ports, but still it's very early. In order to modify the legislation, we need decades, like Bjørn said. And so I don't see any progress in the next 10 years. The most important is to, like Captain Padeli said, how can we troubleshoot when unpredicted events happen on board? This is the most important, because now we have the human element that, okay, we'll troubleshoot and we'll give feedback and maybe rectify. But who will do that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I've been into this discussion for a number of years that the discussion is on. I think the discussion started back in 2015. I can recall the exact conditions under which the discussion started. It's not to be discussed here, but I would agree with all of you. And we also have to take into consideration that the biggest, I would say, threat to this autonomous shipping, I would say that I haven't heard anyone else saying this, is the decarbonization. The reason is the money on the table are a constant, let's say. With an invention like a money tree has not been invented yet, meaning the money on the table that the operators use and they have in their, let's say, supply is a constant. So in that sense, when we're going to see that the cost of the fuels will be 2, 3, 4, 5 times the cost we have today, the operating expenses of a ship will skyrocket. So in that sense, because there are costs involved, as Bjørn correctly pointed out, and we all agree, there are costs by introducing the technology, introducing the standards, and so on and so forth with all these complexities. Yes, there are numerous challenges. I would like to ask both of you if you think, both Captain Padelis and Captain Dimitrios, if you think that autonomous shipping is a threat to cruise, because we heard that in the past. I would like to hear your thoughts. If you see as a threat, let's say, to seamanship and to cruise in general. Captain Padelis.
To be honest, no, I don't believe there is immediate threat. I still believe that there still need to be a backup. There still need to be a remote supervision of autonomous ships. So people will still have to have stations manned and remotely, let's say, navigate or supervise a vessel. So there will be a need there. For sure, there will be a need for increased shore personnel. So a lot of ship's personnel will be absorbed by the companies, by the operators. And in regards to autonomous, to reducing the emissions and the environmental impact, this will have, according to my opinion, an effect with the autonomous ports by arranging the vessel's arrivals at the port, avoiding congestion and so on. This will have a benefit, let's say, to the environmental impact and the emissions that the vessels are currently having. But this should also be, let's say, legislatively clarified with the main stakeholders, charters, and so on, in order to have a mutual agreements for when the vessels are going to be arriving in port, notes of residence, and so on. All this needs to be clarified, and from then on, I believe there will be a benefit, environmental benefit from this autonomous ports and the way it's going to, the system is going to be working in the future.
Yeah, I fully agree that, and I see some of the panelists nodding. We all agree there is more fog than clear skies ahead of us in several issues, as you correctly pointed out. Captain Dimitrios, your thoughts? Any sort of threat to seamanship and cruise in general?
As Captain Padelis said, I will totally agree. This will be reconstructed, the manning of the ships, and this will happen gradually. So seamen will focus, of course, on shore-based jobs, and a lot of companies will absorb them. This is for sure. We need more operators than crew, but this will happen very gradually, and I think this will affect for sure their careers and seamanship as a whole. So regarding now the emissions, I will agree with Captain Pantelis. I don't see any so much, disadvantages on that. I think it will be beneficial in a long term, of course. But still, all these are in a theoretical level. It's so much to be done again, and we need a lot of forums to discuss and so on to have an update.
It's interesting. I'm always saying it's interesting to see the paradigm, let's say in the case study of the introduction of ECTIS, from the initialization of the discussions in the IMO level and the industry level, up to what we have, and you've seen what we have over the course of the last 15 years on board ships. We've seen operators installing ECTISes and replacing them after 5 years in order to have the same model. Why? Because they have faced challenges. We've seen people involved in the ECTIS industry saying, yes, we should have been into a better collaboration, discussing a better standard, a more uniform, UI, and so on and so forth. There are several lessons to be learned, and I cannot agree more with Bjørn and to all of you, saying, as I stated with what Captain Pantelis said, we have more fog than clear sky. So this is, what we've seen. Marvin, your thoughts, where did you see autonomous shipping in general? I'm not asking only for ships. And how are you preparing towards that end? Your thoughts?
The tendency to reduce crew is nothing new. I mean, we saw this over the last decades already. So this is continuing. But I also think that you had a good point before that with increasing fuel costs, with alternative fuels, etc., the percentage of crew costs as part of the OPEX might be smaller, and therefore the economical savings by reducing crew might be fewer, which might actually slow down the crew reduction for the next few years. And as previously said by the other speakers, for sure the legislative changes, they will take another 10, 20 years. So we are definitely stuck with crew for 10, 20 years, which means for us, of course, we will continue to provide up-to-date crew training. And then, as Dimitrios, as Pantelis said, seafarers are moving actually to shore-based positions, and in the same time, jobs are moving with automation from the ship to the shore. But these people, they still need operator trainings. So for us as a training provider, basically, I see the future that we need to stay on top of the e-navigation topic. And if the shops move ashore, our trainings will be adapted and they will be delivered for shore personnel. But I believe there will always be a training need because of this rapidly changing technology, which I don't see any time that it will slow down.
Yeah, absolutely. And there was one comment made yesterday in the game changer technology panel, that even if we have, let's say, planes, for example, and that's a good example of the planes, planes can, operate without any sort of pilots on board. But if you ask anyone to board a plane without a pilot, they would say, no, thank you very much. I'll skip, I'll pass, no worries. Even if I've heard people saying, even if they pay me, I will not make a travel without the pilot on board for a number of reasons. That's human nature. We cannot fight human nature at some point. So we will have to bear in mind, because I've seen people being afraid of all these developments. We shouldn't be afraid in general. Yes, Marvin, you would like to comment?
It's a very good point, actually. And I mean, Bjørn can tell us, how long already do you have an integration of a full autopilot in the ECTIS? It exists for many years. And there are some vessels, maybe still only few, that are using it, especially on the high seas, that they don't even use the course pilot, they use the full autopilot, automatic course changes. That all works, but it didn't lead to any removal of the crew. We are still far away from having an unmanned bridge. We have the unmanned engine room in the night, but the bridge is manned 24/7, and it's gonna continue like that, even if we have the technology for many years.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So as we have to, let's say, conclude, I would like to ask for your final thoughts. My last question is, if I would like to ask you to pick one thing, if you could change one thing that will have, let's say, either a profound or an immediate impact to improve in navigation, to improve maritime safety, what would you pick and why? Captain John.
Well, from an insurer's perspective and my own personal view, the number of incidents that we see in the Standard Club and claims arising still from the persistent human element error is alarming. Despite all the training, despite all the tools and all the technology, it's still alarming. So what I would like to see is a greater awareness amongst the mariners just of the frailty of what's around them, the dangers that's around them, and to be more alert. And if there's some tool out there that can be developed to increase that alertness, or some design or some training that can be done to encourage that, then that's what I would like to see.
Okay. Bjørn, your thoughts?
I will show to the last sentence in the definition of e-navigation, which is protection of the marine environment. That is part of e-navigation. And I think we will see a big work and a lot of efforts going into that one, fulfilling the UN ambitions of reducing fuel consumption to net zero in a short time. And that should not be a standalone. It should be integrated again into the other system, because e-navigation as we know it today and sustainable navigation is one thing basically. So I hope to see that happen.
Okay. Captain Pantelis, your thoughts?
Yes, I believe that the users first of all must be conscious of the systems, be well trained, and understand the benefits of what they are using, depriving themselves from the complacency that they can be facing just being behind the screen like a video game. I feel that this uniformity is a must for the future. Sophisticated systems such as NAVTOR, it's not a sales pitch, I do believe it, should be throughout the industry, because they are really saving time for our seafarers and making the whole process of passage planning, monitoring much more easier. And by this way, we can use the benefits of e-navigation and EGDIS to the skeptic of how it was the reason why the systems were made, you know, to release the seafarers, the navigators from a lot of the manual workload, and leave them being more, let's say, conscious of the whole surroundings, assisting them in that way. This is what I believe.
Okay, thank you, Captain Pantelis. Captain Dimitrios, your thoughts?
In my opinion, seafarers should give their feedback, their view at this stage, because they need to shape it. They have the knowledge. They are on board, so we have to make sure that this works for them. So we need them. We need their feedback, and also we need to distill the likes from the needs. This is also very important. We have some technological advancement, we can use it, but we need to reshape their attitude. It's not the technology that makes the trouble, it's the attitude of the operators. So of course, we need to train them better, and we need to change their philosophy regarding e-navigation. This is my opinion.
Thank you. And Marvin, your final thoughts?
I can fully agree with what Dimitrios just said. The user feedback is incredibly important. And what Pantelis said before, they need to be conscious of the systems. So for this, what I can imagine as a great improvement to maritime safety, navigation safety, would be a closer cooperation of ship operators, their crew, and their training providers. To have more specific, more meaningful training, because all people on board, especially officers, have huge training matrices to fulfill. They have a training calendar scheduled throughout the year. There is so much training going on, and it needs to be ensured that this training is actually efficient, that it doesn't just result in a compliance certificate, but that it does actually improve the operation on board, the navigation on board, and that people actually also retain that knowledge. Because people do an active training, then maybe before they go on board, actually something's changed in their schedule, they go to another ship, 2 years later, they go to a ship and they say, I have the certificate from 2 years back, but will they remember anything from that? So all these things, they are operational needs. We cannot change them. Schedule changes happen. People might need to go to other ships, etc. That's an operational reality that we need to accept. But we need to work closer together to ensure that the training that is actually done is a valuable use and is valuable use of the time of the seafarers.
Thank you. Thank you all very much. I would say we have enough food for thought. More questions than answers, to put it in that sense. That's nice. However, I cannot agree more with all of you. We as an industry are in the early stages of the learning curve. We have to talk more, we have to collaborate more, absolutely. And we have to have open discussions about what is being, good and what is not being, let's say, so good. Otherwise, we cannot, progress, we cannot move forward. So having said that, I would like to thank you all very much for the constructive feedback. We have a set of presentations planned, and we'll be back in an hour with the last panel of the forum regarding the human element. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, Apostle.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Dear all, my name is Bjørn Åge Hjøllo. I'm Chief Sustainability Officer in NAVTOR. I've been working in the maritime industry all my professional life as a maritime meteorologist, later in CMAP, you may know those, and a co-founder in NAVTOR in 2011. All the time I've been working with development, product development and business development. And today I will give you an insight in how we in NAVTOR see e-navigation continuing into sustainable shipping. So let's start with the original definition of e-navigation. I'm sure you know this one. But please note the yellow part here. It's also involved protection of the marine environment. NAVTOR has focused on 2 of the 5 prioritized solutions. It will be the integration of information and the automated reporting. That's where we can contribute. So let's start with integration of information. E-navigation was and is all about removing the burden of paper in moving from paper to digital. Most of you probably remember the Actis mandate back in 2011, where we founded NAVTOR. Also being about regulation, and regulation are hard to do without benefit. It was only increased cost and the safety was the only benefit. But we introduced the pay as you sail. It reduced the workload, it gave you free planning, and it granted compliance, always having updated ENCs and licenses. And we introduced our platform for daily e-navigation services with our planning station on board, shore-based fleet management system, and not least the nav box. In addition, digital updating reduced the deficiencies on board, almost to zero, in fact. In fact, our vessel do have 0. And that's a very important benefit as well. And we could see the increase of selling our services speeded up by this. The important part here was the nav box being both a server and a gateway, but also granting cybersecurity according to the type approval. And all information on board flows around in the NAVTOR suite, giving all stakeholders an up-to-date and identical operational picture. The main part was the first version of NavStation coming in 2012, and later introducing layer of information on top of the ENCs. On top of the ENCs, we had additional information layer. We had route planning introduced, ADP. We had e-publication reader coming, weather overlay, nav area warnings, environmental regulations, passage planning being our most important part of that, and maneuvering assistance, weather routing, and lately also user layer. And that is also how we see that we should continue developing our services. The most important part was the passage planning module, which gave it kind of the top service, utilizing all the information further down in our services. And in fact, it also gave us the SMART4SEA e-navigation award in 2019. So let us also take a quick look on the second prioritized solution where we can contribute to automated reporting. We have joined our project, being the Sesame project, where Kongsberg is heading it. And we have worked close with Kongsberg Norcontrol and the Coastal Administration in Norway to develop ship-shore reporting using the IMO reference model or the ISO 28005 model, and further refining this one in the project. And late last year, we completed a successful machine-to-machine testing of the reporting ship-shore, being the MLS reporting, Marine Reporting Service, for the CALDO rep, for the BAR rep, and the GOF rep. And we also did successful IMO fall reporting, arrival and departure reporting, for the maritime single window in Norway. So, in fact, we think now that we have reached our level of maturity on this, and we are waiting more BTS, ports, and authorities to go digital to be able to receive our digital reporting. And just a short story, summing up, our e-navigation made simple or easy has been quite successful for us, where we have added more and more vessels. And today we have 7,500 vessels that are connected to our services on a daily basis. And that's kind of bringing us into the definition of e-navigation once more. Because I think we have to focus now on the protection of the marine environment. And the reason is, as you all know, that the CO2 content in the atmosphere is peaking together with the global warming. We see that the Sustainable Development Goals of UN is being more and more important. We have to support IMO in reducing the emission by 50% within 2050. And not least, the UN climate meeting in Glasgow strengthened this ambition to be net zero by 2050. This is ambitious and it's tough, but we can all in the shipping industry contribute. From NAVTOR side, we see that we can contribute especially to two of those Sustainable Development Goals, the e-navigation, safe navigation, and the one for efficient navigation. And if you add those together, you get sustainable shipping. And that is the future of e-navigation as we see it. NAVTOR has the philosophy again to join this and integrate these new services into our platform, to have the full benefit of this platform and the combined effect of combining e-navigation with efficient shipping. So we have started adding new information and new services into the platform. The environmental regulation has been added. Lately, and the last month, we announced that we have acquired Genie Marine, giving us digital logbooks that we are now also integrating into our platform. And not least, of course, is the NavFleet, our web-based fleet management platform, It has been extended with a complete performance service and is now turned into a total ship operation platform, which include performance monitoring and KPIs, reporting of IMO, DCS, EU MLV, and Energy Efficiency Operational Index, the annual efficiency ratio, and not least, the carbon intensity indicator that will be the one that is rating your ship. And you see how we can monitor the carbon intensity indicator and tell you exactly if you are achieving your goals or not, and also doing prediction how it will be in the future, and not least give you guidance in how to achieve your goal of the CII. And moreover, we have the platform again for sustainable shipping. What we do is to take the safe navigation platform and add on with services for efficient navigation. That being data catch, data management, data transport, adding third-party data and exchange data with third parties, adding AI on top of that to the monitoring and decision support, and have new services for performance, for weather optimization, and not least advisory services. And important enough, this AI-supported monitoring and decision support will not be tailored for the fleet. It will be tailored for each single vessel. So AI-based monitoring and decision support for each vessel. So related to the same as we did for e-navigation, we see that we have to do for sustainable shipping. You have to find the large carrot. What is beneficial for the ship owner to do now related to sustainable shipping? I think fuel saving is a must, because it will basically be too costly not to save fuel, taking also into account the quota cost. But I think also access to sustainable financing will be very important for all ship owners. The larger ship owners are already taking benefit of these possibilities, and we see medium and smaller ship owners are now looking into such opportunities as well. And as always, NAVTOR will be ready to support and contribute to existing and new customers to achieve their goals related to sustainable shipping as well. And that in fact concludes my presentation. Just relax. Thank you for watching, and I hope to be able to take questions face to face next time. See you next time.
Today I am going to talk about maritime automation terminology. My name is Päivi Haikkola, and I come from 1SEA Autonomous Maritime Ecosystem. What we are trying to do is to make maritime autonomy happen by 2025. The company that I am hired by is called DIMEC, which is an innovation platform company, and we are providing the services to 1SEA. 1SEA consists of 10 different companies who are working together from different perspectives to bring about maritime autonomy, as I said. We have a presence around the world. We do want to spread even further out because we do feel that as maritime is global, that is what we need to be as well. Now, we do a lot of activities within 1SEA, and this slide is a picture of some of those activities. Today's topic is mostly related to the rules and regulations part of what we are doing. 1SEA, as we are trying to enable autonomous and related technologies and application of those technologies globally, we do also need to have new regulations in place to take these higher automation technologies on board ships and to utilize them. And in order to do that, we cooperate with different both national and international entities. So we work with flag states, with EMSA in the European Union, with IAX, and especially with IMO. And we have submitted a paper to IMO Maritime Safety Committee meeting 105 regarding the terminology. And today's presentation is going to talk about that a little bit. The question, why do we need definitions relating to automation in maritime? There are different needs, obviously. The companies that are in 1SEA, the industry, they need to be able to offer solutions to their customers, and in order to talk about the products, they need to have some sort of common language. Obviously, for the owners and operators who are going to apply these technologies, they need to understand what they are being offered and what they are considering. For the regulation side, we need to come and agree on a common taxonomy in order to be able to define where the rules and regulations and different policies would be. And of course, the general public and infrastructure providers, they both need to understand what is going on. The infrastructure providers to be able to provide correct solutions, and the general public just to be able to understand what is going on. First, some general principles about the terminology. For starters, a ship is a large entity, and when we're talking about terminology related to automation, it can be applied to the whole ship, but also to ship systems and functions separately. In common terminology, we often talk about autonomous as being the same thing as uncrewed. This is something that causes a lot of confusion because we must understand that manning principles are a separate issue and actually have nothing to do with the technology of automation. So these two should not be mixed. Then we come to the term of remote monitoring and operation. In many cases, people are mixing up remote operation with increased automation. But in reality, the location where the human operator is located, whether it be on board the ship somewhere else or on board another ship or on shore is not relevant to the taxonomy of automation and autonomy. So what is essential then? Automation levels should refer to levels of human attention that is required for safe operation of systems. And you can look at the attentions needed from different angles. Obviously, when you have different conditions, such as fog or storm, you do need more continuous human attendance than you would in easy conditions. The same regarding the situation that you are in. So if you're, for example, approaching a port with lively traffic, it is a situation that needs much more human attention than being at high seas. And of course, time is also a factor. In lower automation levels, the system can work safely for much shorter times and then without human attendance. Now, this is an image of the levels of automation that the 1SEA members have agreed upon between themselves. These levels of automation have been modified from the automotive industry's SAE levels, obviously with maritime focus, but still it's felt to us that we need to have a possibility for comparison between the two. When we look at the lowest levels, we have what we call basic operation, where human controls a vessel manually or with the help of simple unit automation. And then when you go forward, you can come into what we call assisted operations, which we do have today as well, where the system assists in operations through automation, but does not make connections between observations and controls. So it is still the human basically in control. When you go into partial automation, we have automatic operation of at least one function or operational mode. At this level, you sometimes can have your hands off. Basically, the system monitors the situation and could execute some actions as well to mitigate risks. And in most cases, the operator is required to approve the actions as well. When we step further into higher levels of automation, we come into what we call conditional automation. And here you sometimes could be able to take your eyes off as well. And here, the system suggestions are executed automatically. And we expect that in good conditions, the system can manage for a relative short time period on its own. When we go into high automation, the system suggestions are, of course, again, executed automatically. And many of the tasks are executed by machine. But the machine alerts the human if the situation is unclear. So here we are approaching fairly high levels of automation already. And the final level, which is what we call autonomous. And we think that it's important to understand that this is actually what autonomous means. And when we're talking about the lower levels, we should talk about automation. On this level, there is fully autonomous operation. And the idea is that there can be hands off, eyes off, and minds off. The functions or operational models or operations are automated fully. Now, the measuring stick here is the level of human attention that is needed. And we think this is important to take into consideration when talking about automation. And as mentioned earlier, this is specifically related to automation levels of various functions or systems on board a vessel. So again, a level of technology that we are looking at. We would like to invite all the listeners of this presentation to discuss these terminology issues with us further. And we do hope to share thoughts on this with you in the future as well. SMART4SEA is looking forward to also discussing other activities that we are doing with you in the future. Thank you.
Thank you for this opportunity to share some views on how shipping can transform through technology. My name is Pia Meling, and I represent Masterly. So Masterly is owned by two very experienced and strong, but also innovative companies. Kongsberg Maritime is a complete equipment supplier and system integrator for around 30,000 ships. Wilhelmsen is best known as a leading owner of car carriers, but has extensive business in maritime services and logistics, and they supply products or services to half the world fleet. And both these companies are investing heavily in innovation and new solutions. So the overall aim for Masterly is actually to enable a shift in transport from road to sea through cost-effective, safe, and environmentally friendly logistics. We are providing complete solutions to the end customer, those who actually need to move their cargo and would like to do that in a greener way. Because there is a lot of political will to get cargo on the waterways to reduce emissions from trucks, congestion, and road accidents. But vessels are also polluting. They're stuck in line outside ports, and they are also involved in accidents. You know, most accidents at sea are due to human error, with the leading cause of fatigue and attention deficit. You may have seen this case in October last year, a general cargo ship called Maiden grounded in Denmark. The master, who was a sole watchkeeper, had been drinking wine, and when he needed to use the toilet, because the one on the bridge didn't flush properly, he went 3 decks down to use the toilet in his cabin, where he fell asleep until 4 hours later he was woken by the chief engineer following the grounding. The ship had a crew of 7, including 3 navigational officers. And you also probably remember this bulk carrier, Vakashio, who grounded in Mauritius in 2020 and caused an ecological disaster as 1,000 tons of fuel leaked into the ocean in a very sensitive coral reef area. This vessel had deviated from its planned course for Wi-Fi coverage. The electronical nautical chart had the wrong scale, and the crew neglected appropriate watchkeeping. The captain and the first officer were later arrested, found guilty of endangering safe navigation. And in 2018, this Norwegian frigate Helge Ingstad collided with a tanker vessel. Inexperienced officers of the watch and lack of training led to wrong situational awareness on the bridge, and they were actually mistaking a moving vessel with a stationary object on shore. So digitalization, automation, and connected vessels can actually reduce the risk of human error and increase efficiency. Smarter vessels and remote support will also assist us in the energy transition. So let's take a look at autonomy as the tool for smarter shipping. Autonomous vessels will have lower daily operation costs because a reduced or even no crew on board is supported by shore-based operators who can supervise several vessels. Automation can provide significant safety benefits as the automated system never gets tired or emotional. And reduced costs can also be seen as a means to afford zero-emission technology like batteries or green fuels like hydrogen or ammonia. But it's important to remember that autonomous doesn't mean unmanned. As you can see from this graph, there are various degrees of whether a ship can operate independently of human interaction. Our first customers in Masterly are actually cargo owners who want to move goods by sea rather than truck. And for them, we're designing new vessels that are capable of being totally unmanned and operated from our remote operations center. But the Norwegian RoPax ferry operator, Fosen, is sailing with a full crew on its repetitive route in southern Norway. They're, however, using auto-docking and adaptive transit functionality to optimize the crossing, the approach, and the docking in the 2 ports of call. And the result is more exact timekeeping and reduced energy consumption. We believe that technology, data, and shoreside support can also be used to reduce OPEX for the ocean-going fleet. We call this next generation shipping. fuel cost, crew cost, and maintenance cost can be reduced by thinking differently about what tasks are performed on board and what can be done autonomously or remote. So many of you have probably heard about this ship, the world's first fully electric and autonomous container ship, which was contracted by fertilizer producer Yara. Well, the vessel is now a reality, and it is undergoing testing of various components of the autonomy package, both on board the vessel and also on shore. So we will develop gradually from manned operations to unmanned operations over the next 2 years. Another cargo owner who's becoming ship owner is ASKO, the leading grocery distributor in Norway. They're investing in a zero-emission logistics chain, which include fully electric trailers and 2 battery-driven autonomous vessels that will cross the Oslo fjord. So the electric vehicles will pull trolleys between warehouses and ports, and the trolleys will be transported over the fjord on this electric ro-ro vessel, which will be unmanned. And in port, the trolleys are loaded on and off these vessels with electrical and autonomous terminal tractors. Today, ASKO uses only trucks, only road transportation for moving their goods around. And they have to drive in a very congested area and through a tunnel, which is often closed for maintenance. So with these 2 vessels, we are actually replacing 150 trucks per day and cutting CO2 emissions by 5,000 tons per year. These vessels are being constructed at Indian Yard Cochin and will be ready during Q2 this year, and then will be set in operation in the summer. And after 2 years of testing with a reduced crew on board both Yara Birkeland and these 2 ASKO vessels, we estimate to have approval for unmanned voyages during 2024. Because the Norwegian Maritime Authority have defined 5 levels of autonomy, and we aim to be certified to operate level 4 unmanned. From a remote operation center, which will be manned with skilled operators. So we're working with all these various stakeholders, class society, of course, and also a university in Norway, to prove that autonomous functions will be as safe or safer than conventional operations. We still have a lot of items under discussion, but there is a lot of will in Norway politically and I think by many parties to allow for unmanned vessels in our domestic waters. And when we talk about autonomous operation, most people, they focus only on the vessel systems, but equally important is the remote operation center, connectivity, of course, and the company and the people who ensure safe and efficient operations from shore. So we're in process of setting up a remote operation center for Yara and ASKO vessels. And there will be a gradual development of functionality from this center. So first, the operators will just support and assist the crew on board. And only when we have tested all scenarios and feel confident about the safety, will we take the crew gradually off and start monitoring the autonomous unmanned operations from shore. This is an illustration of how the remote operation center will look. As I mentioned, we collaborate with the Maritime University to develop additional training needed for these licensed operators who will have this as their workplace in the future. And we are actually currently in the process of employing the first team of operators with a background as navigators and engineers and electricians. And I think from operating these small unmanned vessels in fixed trades domestically in Norway, we expect to learn a lot that we also believe can benefit the deep sea segment. So our owner and partner, Wilhelmsen Ship Management, have some 400 vessels under management, and they employ around 10,000 seafarers that they continuously train. We believe we can use these technological innovations from short sea to change how we work, also on conventional vessels, both on board and from shore. We think higher safety, lower cost, and also a successful transition to zero and low emission fuels can be achieved. So Mastery aims to use our remote operation center facilities and these certified navigators and chief engineers who will work there 24/7, also to serve manned vessels. Some examples of such services could be assistance on performance monitoring and reporting, condition-based maintenance, and support from shore to limit overtime use and keep resting hours for the crew. With the ferry operators, we're actually also discussing a remote chief engineer, meaning that a high competency chief is working from the rock while supporting several vessels. This is a transition that could be made possible by battery-driven vessels, where there's no real need for maintenance during transit. And a periodically unmanned bridge, meaning that the rock performs the bridge watch in a low-risk situation, may also be a reality in the not too distant future. We also believe that access to enough competent shore-based crew for the energy transition could be a benefit, while the industry is starting to adopt new green fuels like hydrogen, ammonia, or methanol. It will be an advantage to have some experts in the loop, not having to duplicate all that expertise on board all the vessels. And we can also help future-proof new buildings with higher degrees of automation so that the refit cost is limited when new ways of working are actually a reality. So the technology is here, it's ready. Let's explore our smart, connected, and autonomous future. Thank you.
Welcome everyone. Today's presentation is about realistic and relevant navigation training being the key to safer shipping, and about the dilemma that ship officers, among others, face. They need to complete a lot of different training courses, and at the same time, they should retain all the knowledge. They have extensive training schedules, training matrices of what they need to complete, but they are also expected to remember all of that. My name is Marvin Bielek. I'm a nautical author, instructional learning designer, and a trainer at Mintra. I became a nautical officer and developed a passion for navigational safety, and I've worked with safety critical trainings since 2014. My focus was always on how modern bridge infrastructure and technology can actually serve the navigation officers and the overall safety of the vessel, from bridge layout, software interface, up to training design. But before we look on board, let's talk a little bit about the rapid development of technology and information sources. Round-the-clock news coverage, the internet, social media platforms. We are bombarded with information. Since 2000, the number of internet users increased from 361 million to around 5 billion. Half the world's population is connected to the World Wide Web. It's an impressive number. According to a statistic from August 2021, an average internet minute includes 5.5 million Google searches every minute conducted. 6 million people shopping online. 100,000 users connected on Teams. 856 minutes of webinars hosted on Zoom every minute. And most impressively, 167 million videos watched by TikTok users. Really big number for a relatively new platform. But all of this adds up to one thing: information overload. But most of us ashore can simply switch off when we are overwhelmed by information. Those people in safety critical professions don't have that luxury. The bridge of a ship is an environment of extreme stimulation. There are monitors, alarms. Many of you may have heard of the term alarm fatigue, screens, blinking everywhere. The introduction of actors has added to the information that needs to be absorbed by an officer and to the training that is required. So, when we entrust nautical officers with the safety of crew, passengers, the ship and cargo, and the environment, how do we ensure they cut through training information overload to recall important information that they received during training, such as actors training? We need to create training that facilitates knowledge retention. It needs to be realistic and relevant. I hear and I forget. I see and I remember. I do and I understand. That's a quote that is often attributed to Confucius. But maybe some of you will remember your own schooling in that context. How many of you have learned algebra in high school? So, if you did, you could be considered to have the knowledge to solve equations. But how many of you can instantly solve an equation right now without having to refer to a textbook? I'm sure some can, but many of you can't because you don't use it or it's not relevant to your current situation. And it's not a problem at all. That's completely normal, but that's not different from training and learning in the maritime industry, or in any industry in that matter. But if I need a vector calculation, for example, to create a training about radar targets, I have time to look it up. In a safety critical position, where decisions often need to be taken in seconds, there is no time to go back and refer to textbooks. The information must be recalled in an instant. Let's stay with the actors training from before. Switching from GPS 1 to GPS 2 is a relatively simple task. Can be done easy enough on most actor systems. It's covered in a course, but it's a 5-minute section in a 16-hour course. So maybe an officer has undertaken the training a year ago, 2 years ago, and now she needs the knowledge right in that moment. So what can we do to support officers on board, to support trainees in general? Training needs to relate to real onboard experiences. It is not enough to tell a person the sequence of buttons to press, unless they also have a situation that they can relate it to. It's easy enough to explain, for example, the switching from one GPS to the other one. But will the people be able to recall that knowledge when it comes to it? Because maybe they're not going to use it for a while, maybe not for a year or two, but then they need it. In terms of maritime accidents and incidents, there are a multitude of factors that influence human error. For example, inattention and poor judgment, stress and fatigue. Then, of course, the ever-increasing complexity of equipment. We just talked about it, how it becomes more, access was added, things are getting more complex. They are helping, but they're getting more complex. Then, of course, there are scheduling pressures, long port calls, short schedules, little time for handovers, etc. And lastly, maybe inadequate processes and aids. But one of the biggest issues is always improper training. It's wrong to assume that if a navigation officer undergoes a lot of training, that they have the knowledge. What they need is appropriate training, kind of quality over quantity. The current most popular training methodology of knowledge dump, provide you everything, a passive learning, is not sustainable, especially when an officer may complete 5 separate training courses in just 5 days. Just a while ago, the UK's Marine Accident Investigation Branch and the Danish Marine Accident Investigation Board conducted a joint report. It was prompted by investigations of groundings in which actors were the primary means of navigation. They examined incidents since 2008, and their findings underline how this problem may grow. It highlighted that actors has diversified navigational practices. It needs different types of training, procedural and technological solutions. One of the outcomes of the report is to support future actors design and training strategies. So, what are the solutions? Firstly, better scheduling to ensure training is spread across the year, not in one block. As I said earlier, there are these matrices, there are training calendars. There's approaches for that. It's a just-in-time approach to ensure officers get the training when it is needed most. However, even then, there are often sudden changes in schedules, or an assignment to a different ship may happen because of an operational requirement. This is the reality of an industry that needs to be considered too. So even the best scheduling by itself might not be sufficient. Then we have micro-learning, bit-sized learning built up over time. I believe everybody is using this nowadays, know it or not. If you look up something on a YouTube tutorial or check something on a website, it's kind of micro-learning. Not structured, but it is. But simply hacking a large training into smaller parts doesn't solve the issue. Micro-learning, when needed, works fine for non-critical functions and mostly with online access. I can go through an Excel tutorial before creating a report, but an officer cannot go through a tutorial before lowering the lifeboat during an emergency. So, the third pillar, relevant subject matter expert, SME, input. First-hand knowledge is critical in presenting relevant information. I believe everybody experienced that during training, even during school. Last, but by no means least, high-quality instructional design. And by that, I don't mean just fancy slide design, though this also helps because it keeps the attention of learners. But it also needs a combination of smaller, more accessible training parts. Many of the courses we do now are sectionized for that reason, to break down a larger course into more accessible sections with different learning outcomes, different objectives. But what training most of all needs is to be more relevant to the real world and linked to the objective of a real world task for seafarers, for nautical officers, and onboard task. For us, this comes from close cooperation and from a careful selection of the subject matter experts. As we see, all the points here, they are linked. None of them alone solves the issue, but a combination can help. The core takeaway is that the officers should associate the how with the why. Thank you all for listening. I'm looking forward to answering your questions and to have a nice discussion at the panel. Goodbye.
welcome back. This is the final, let's say, the last panel for the SMART4SEA Forum. In this panel, we're going to be discussing about the human factors in the smart shipping era. And before we open this panel, we had a set of presentations on how to simplify sustainable shipping, about the maritime automation terminology, a very interesting presentation, transforming shipping with new technologies by Pia Meling, and the realistic and relevant navigation training to safer shipping by Mintra. We are opening this panel to discuss human factors in the smart shipping era. And human element has been identified by several stakeholders within the industry, starting from the IMO and Ajax to roundtable associations and to going to OKIMF. Even the latest standards like the dry BMS have identified human element being in human factors in one of the key ingredients for a successful, let's say, ship management equation. So the fundamentals are there. We need competent people. Certainly, we need to have a balance between a safe ship and happy people. And we would like to discuss in this panel of how to harmonize, the human factors, the key challenges, the impact of smart shipping to seafarers, the future skills and training, digital applications, and how we could, let's say, improve the crew welfare and the crew happiness on board ships, and the over-reliance on technology. So in order to have this discussion, I have assembled a panel of experts. Let me introduce them to you. We have Dimitri Gladkov. Dimitri is the Managing Director of OneLearn Global. Captain Somasander Golakota, who is the co-founder of Big Yellow Fish. Captain Kostas Karavasilis, who is the Senior Loss Prevention Executive with UK P&I Club. Johanna Kuhl, who is the Loss Prevention Executive with Alandia. And last but not least, Mads Nielsen, who is the co-founder and CEO of Scout Base. I would like to welcome you all, and I would like to start our discussion. The first topic I would like to put on the table is the connection between the pandemic and the human factors, the human element. So it's up to you to make the connection, could be in any way. So let's hear from you, starting with Johanna.
Thank you, Apostolos. First out, very interesting discussion so far. So thank you for inviting me to this. Of course, we can see many things that happened over these 2 past years. And if we, or I like to maybe look at the benefits. Of course, we know it has been a lot of challenges and very hard, but if we look at the pros, we can see that human factor has not been talked about this much before, like during the pandemic. So it is raising awareness, and that's a really good thing. I can point out, though, that I think there is still kind of a misunderstanding what human factor is really about. Like, people seem to still divide like technical knowledge and human factor and hard and soft skills. We can also see that that doesn't really fit with the real world, because there is a constant interaction between human and technology. I think we still need to spread awareness about this, and I think to take the next step into the smart shipping area, we need to have the approach that technical solution must support human behavior and not the other way around. And I think the pandemic in itself has really learned us that.
Thank you, Johanna. Kostas, your thoughts?
Well, I totally agree with Johanna. First of all, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for, Apostolos, thank you again for giving me the honor to talk to such an event. And I would like also to thank also the participants who have logged in and listening to us talking about this very important thing. So yes, primarily I would like to agree with Johanna. And what we've seen is that the pandemic gave, it has two angles. Let's say one is that after so many years, we touched upon crew members and the lives and the human factor on board ships and happiness and wellness, and that was very serious. And on the other angle is that we were able to test new technologies and to see how we can apply them on board ships. To my mind is that, you know, a technology that is advancing very fast. And unfortunately, due to the fact that we all know that there is a lack in certified, let's say, crew members worldwide, especially officers, we do not have the time to train, and we do not have, you know, the people to be able to cope with this advancing technology. And this, in the near future, may lead to problems. Currently not, because still the majority of the vessels are not, let's say, so that smart, if I may say that. But within the next 5 to 10 years, ships are going to become very smart, whereas the people who run those ships, they will not be able to cope with this advancing technology unless something dramatic happens. And I don't think that something dramatic will happen.
We'll see. It's a bold prediction, but we'll see how it goes, because in my eyes, you know, reality exceeds imagination. So we have to add some sort of disclaimer notice to what we said. Soma and Mats are providers, you know, they're using technology in order to improve crew welfare. Let's hear from them. Soma, your thoughts, the link between the pandemic and the human factors. What's your take?
Yes, thank you. And thanks to everybody for allowing me to be here. And thank you for listening, everyone. It's super interesting to have the ability to discuss these things in a forum like this. I very much agree to what has been said already. But another angle to it, or another thing I would like to say, is that a lot of the stuff we've seen sort of surface from the pandemic is not exclusive to the pandemic, as I see it. It's stuff that has been there already. It has just been sort of reinforced because of the challenges that the pandemic has brought along. But as you also pointed out, Apostolos, it's also in a way an opportunity, right? Because now we are aware of something important that we didn't pay as much attention to before. And just the fact that it's surfaced, that it's now very much in our face, allows us to do something, and we should do something. And that's really that would be my sort of that would be my that's what I would like to say. I mean, we need to do something. We know that we have a problem. We cannot ignore it. It's not enough to put our heads in the bushes and say, oh, this is a difficult topic to deal with, so we're just going to leave it. It's not good enough anymore. That's what I would say. Okay.
Soma, your take, your thoughts.
Yeah, I think thanks everyone. I think I agree with all the, you know, with Nilsson and Kostas and Joanna in terms of how they relate to the pandemic, and I agree with Mats on the point that the issue of human element and the human-centered approach in the maritime industry existed even before the pandemic. I think it is something very important for us to take note of. But more importantly, in relation to the pandemic, one important thing that has happened in the industry is that it has brought a closer engagement between the ship and the shore. I think this is something very important for all of us to note, because for the longest period, this angle of engagement, the angle of trust and transparency, was something which was kind of a gap that existed for the longest period. For the most of the time, the industry always thought that the ship is somewhere where things could be thrust upon on the seafarers, and they were supposed to carry out the way it is. So there was an expectation, but the expectation did not meet the implementation. But what the pandemic definitely changed is the change in the mindset, shift in the mindset to understand the people more closely, the seafaring community more closely, start seeing them from a very different lens as compared to what they have seen in the past. And I think that is something which is definitely noteworthy of. And whatever technology, whatever smart ship projects that we bring in, this engagement layer has to be thought through well before we implement. I think, and that is what will shift how things will move in and how the seafarers and the seafaring community or the shipping community will resonate to it. So in my opinion, that is the difference that the pandemic has brought in.
Thank you. And Dimitri, your thoughts on what's the link between the pandemic and the human element?
Right. Thank you very much indeed. Nice to see everyone. And thanks very much for giving me a chance to be on this panel. Nice to meet everyone and looking forward to a nice discussion. So I totally agree with all the colleagues on the panel, and especially with Mads and Thome, that the challenges and human-related factor challenges, we faced them for a long time, and they came before pandemic started, and pandemic just sharpened the situation, so we start looking into that more precisely, let's say. Yeah, and I want to address the following challenges. I was sailing on the vessels in the 90s. I'm an engineer, and I was sailing on the roro vessel, on quite large roro vessel, and we had 36 people on board, and believe me or not, at that time it was enough work for everyone on the vessel. Yeah, and we were carrying the watch, we were working overtime, so everyone were quite busy on board. Today, a similar vessel would be manned with how many? 18 people, just 18 people, and this figure is not much higher than the minimum safe manning arrangement. Yeah, and this is where we're talking now about fatigue, about these human aspects, like fatigue, like stress, like work pressure on the seafarers. Yeah. At the same time, what we have is there are estimations that in 2025 we will have a huge shortage of officers, and the figure estimated is about 100,000 officers shortage, and this is really disruptive for the world trade, basically. And for shipping, of course, because we know that most of the cargoes are carried by vessels. And this is where I think technology is here to help to assist us with bringing more automation onto the vessels in terms of making, improving life on board and releasing the stress of people, and of course, improving the safety culture on board.
Okay, thank you, Dimitri. Now, my next topic is about the main challenges imposed by these smart shipping developments to human factors. What are, let's say, the issues at the top of your agenda with respect to challenges of smart shipping to the human factor? Johanna.
Thank you, Apostolos. This question actually brings my mind directly to the research about multitasking. I know it has been a question about how we can use digital tools and still have this situational awareness where we can focus. And I think it's also we can see that research has shown that trying to multitask is useless, both for women and men. Say, you minimize your focus not in just half by trying to do similar things at the same time. You perform way less on both tasks. But with that said, digital applications should not be used in multitasking. They should be used in situations where they actually help your focus and support performance. And I have a really basic example of that. A digital notebook. If you suddenly remember something you have to do, it is much better to immediately write it down on your phone. Otherwise, your brain will be occupied by you trying to remember what you need to do until you have completed the tasks. I think applications must be adapted for human behavior and usage, and we have to make sure they don't compete with situations that require attention. It is not enough bringing yet another distraction for seafarers. It's about enhancing performance and supporting humans and businesses' needs, of course.
Thank you, Johanna. Kostas, your thoughts?
Well, I'm very fond of technology, digitalization, and everything that it is new. But when I deal with them, I am at the security of my home nowadays. So I do have the time to navigate through different applications, through different devices, through very different things. Now, going back, let's say, to my seafaring years, somebody took me and put me on board a vessel that I have never been before. and I had to, you know, to find out within a very small, let's say, time frame how things work. Yes, the radar, all ships, they did have radar and ARPA, but they used to have different models. So you had to, you know, to get accustomed to the new buttons, to the new screens, to everything. Now, as I said before, you know, before we, you know, technology is here, and on a daily basis, technology is going further and is advancing further. The thing is that the human beings behind, you know, that the ones that they have to use this technology, sometimes or many times are not ready to use that. Yes, the new generation of seafarers, being 20, 25 years old, are very used to this digitalization. But on the other hand, people on their 40s or their 50s, even their 60s, that are captains or senior officers on board vessels, sometimes find it difficult to cope with. So it is up to us, up to people who, let's say, develop these technologies and people ashore, first to educate, not necessarily educate them, you know, take them to school, but to give them the incentive and to make them understand what's going on board and how things will work from now on or in the near future, and then send them there. Otherwise, you have a distressed seafarer, you know, you have to do the job, you have to load the ship, you have to navigate the ship, and then you have this machine in front of you, this application that you have to use because you are told to do that. And you feel frustrated because you do not know, you don't want to use it because you do not know, and then you lose your attention on more important things. Yeah, fully agree, but we have to say, we had a discussion in the previous panel, that's a very long discussion, because I said in the previous panel, I would just repeat it, even there are many lessons to be learned out of the introduction, for example, of the ECDIS technology on board ships, because it took too many years to develop the standards from the IMO level up to you know, to the OMs. Then we had different types of, you know, interfaces between the providers, different types even for hardware, you know, setups, and we've seen operators coping hardly to catch up, and we had seen many operators changing, you know, at least part of their fleet in order to make sure they have one model. So why? To make, as you correctly pointed out, Kostas, the life of the seafarers easier. So there are many lessons to be learned out of this, but the technology is there, and we have to, at some point, I think, we have to speed up all these, you know, the learning curve, and we have to speed up, you know, or smooth up the process. As you correctly pointed out, the challenge is there. Absolutely. Now, if I may, Apostolos, give me 1 second to say, the problem of our industry is standardization. Yeah, absolutely. I think we have discussed that in the past. Yeah, so I see very many companies coming with brilliant, very nice ideas, but the interface at the end of the day is different. So this is a major thing in our industry. Absolutely, and I would strongly recommend all the makers. We've seen it happening in certain sub-segments of the industry. For example, I'll give you an example. The ballast water makers, we're talking about something which is hot right now, have come together to discuss and possibly, you know, harmonize what they provide to the market. Why? Because they have a certain interest, you know, for the crews to operate these sort of equipment, and so on and so forth. We would expect several vendors to come together to collaborate and discuss in advance. Absolutely. Let's hear from Mads. Mads, your thoughts on the key challenges of smart shipping to human factors, human element, and humans in general.
Yeah, let me pick up on this discussion on harmonization, because it's super interesting and it's very, very difficult. I think, I mean, not least because of the nature of the shipping industry, which is super diverse and multicultural and all of these things. So getting to a place where we have some sort of shared understanding about something may be straight up impossible. Maybe that shared understanding just doesn't exist. Nonetheless, I think what is important to point out, that if we want to get at least part of the way towards something that is harmonized or standardized across, we need to get the seafarers into the loop. And that's really where I see the biggest potential threat or challenge, that we develop a lot of stuff without really bringing the people who are using it end of the day into the loop, into the development. And development may happen on the basis of all sorts of commercial basis. Let's say, I mean, you wanna develop features because that sells. That's sexy when you sell it to the technical superintendent. Well, it can do this and it can do that, but end of the day, does it meet the needs of the users? That's really what we need to understand, and that is in itself a big challenge because of this highly diversified environment that the shipping industry is per se. So that is for me a key challenge for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Soma, your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm on the same page as what Matt said. I mean, I was about to come to that point because that's a very interesting point of harmonization, and the aspect that the question we need to ask is who is the stakeholder, right? I mean, it's very important to understand that. And if you really look at the shipping community, it is diverse, not just diverse from cultural diversity, but the very fact that the skill level of people, right, starting from a master of the ship to the crew. And when we implement smart shipping, we need to understand who are the stakeholders in the supply chain there or in the implementation stage. So the problem comes is that if you introduce a technology, the technology understanding and the acceptance of technology will not happen unless and until the seafaring community to some extent or to a large extent becomes a part of that driving force. And to a large extent over the years, if you really look at it, this entire technology or any adoption in the maritime industry of shipping has predominantly been a push that has happened more from the commercial or the technical aspect, more than a pull where the seafarer or the seafaring community has accepted it. The reason being that their participation in this adoption or implementation has been not kind of considered for the longest period. So in my opinion, the importance, or today, I think the industry has to wake up to the point that whenever we want to introduce any new technology or any new process that needs to be adopted into the system, the seafaring community should be taken cognizance and they should be brought into the as key stakeholders to take this forward. Otherwise, the attempt would be still futile and we'll start seeing large gaps irrespective of how much the smart shipping advances from a third party point of view, not so much from the shipping and the seafaring community point of view.
That's an interesting take. Dimitri, your thoughts?
Yeah, thank you, Apostolos. Yeah, we can state that smart ships and smart shipping is already here. We have so much equipment, electronic equipment on board already. Yeah, and with the development of technology further, I'm sure we will bring more and more equipment and technology on board the ships. Now, it is opening the wide field for new training requirements where the crew have to take a lot of training. And your Apostolos, your example with the EGDIS training, I think it's very peculiar here because I was just talking in the morning with a friend of mine who is a captain, and he's now renewing his COC. And he told me that, you know how many EGDIS type specific certificates do I have? I said, how many? He said, 9. So I think it's a bit of a distraction for the crew and dissatisfaction to the crew as well, because, you know, with EGDIS, I think it's a smart example that we were not controlling it properly in terms of manufacturers, so many type specific, you know, options of the EGDIS, where the crew moving within the same company, moving between the vessels, rotating between the vessels, they have to pass, you know, numerous similar courses just to be able to operate EGDIS, right? And this is a challenge, and this is an impact, yeah, as well as generally this is an impact for the crew. Today, a captain or a chief officer has a stack of various diplomas and certificates, yeah, and with the technology, I'm sure that requirement will get even wider. So how many of the certificates would be necessary to obtain? Yeah, and this has to be very much balanced. And I think the proper way to move forward would be to make a lot of research And as Matt said, this has to go, all this technology, all these equipment has to go through the end users who are seafarers in order to get their feedback and implement it. And then what Kostas mentioned, of course, it's a standardization. We have to be very clear on the standardization of all these equipment. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the comments. I would just like to state, there are numerous stakeholders involved in any sort of decision-making process, because in shipping we have too many stakeholders. And just to take the example of the ECDIS training, the only explicit, and I state the word explicit in capitals, requirement of STCW is the generic training, the ECDIS model course 1.27. So this course is a 5-day course with 4 days on theory and 1 day with a simulator. This is what the model course states. Now, the type specific, which is more or less a day or half a day, more or less, in all these types, it's a market need. It's an implicit requirement, not an explicit requirement of the SSW. But again, we've seen that the market, it's a good example, the market has taken the initiative to move things further. Why? Because the market identified different types of ECDIS, and that's a market initiative. It started with the oil majors and then followed up by other players in the market. But we have to also bear in mind that there's a labyrinth process in the IMO level to update these model courses, just for the example of how to start, because we need the standards, of course, we need the practice, we need the providers, provider training, and so on and so forth. It's a number of stakeholders being involved in the process, and that makes it a much more challenging process. So I do understand, but again, I would say it's this process of the introduction of ECDIS to the market has a lot of lessons to be learned for all of us, for all the stakeholders in the market. Now, I'd like to change topic and go to the issue of connectivity. We've seen improvements in the connectivity across the globe over the course of the last, let's say, 20, 30 years. So now we have improved connectivity. And improved connectivity has allowed for ships to exchange a lot of data between ship and shore. And among these things, one of the benefits we've seen for the seafarers is, they have been able to keep up the connections with their friends ashore. And of course, we've seen improvements with the crew welfare, because there are a number of services that can be provided now on board, even with the telemedicine and so on and so forth. So I would like to ask, my question is it a bad thing or is it a good thing, this, improved connectivity? The connectivity we have now, do you see any advantages or disadvantages? What's your take? Is it a positive or a, let's say, much more, let's say, challenging view of this? Johanna, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think I already talked a little about this, but I should mention it again. I was actually talking about the connectivity issue earlier when I talked about multitasking, and I think that is what you refer to as well, that it could be disturbing for situational awareness. But as I mentioned, of course, research showed that we can't multitask. That's not even a word that we could use because it's not possible. But I would say that connectivity is actually, as I can see, it's something that is really good, because as we have seen also during the pandemic, that reaching out to people, reaching out to family, reaching out to other people, it's really important for everybody. And also, if we see how attractive maritime industry is in the future, this is really important, because if you are going for work and can't reach any of your family and friends, I don't know if younger generation are going to choose maritime industry. So I see this connectivity is it's important.
Okay, Kostas?
Well, yes, connectivity is very important. And again, going back to, my seafaring days, that we didn't have internet on board and we had to use, the radio, and the whole fleet around us would hear what we would say back home. So yes, it is a big step. And yes, it has to be there, and seafarers have to be able to connect back home. But on the other hand, we have new challenges coming, such as, let's say, cybersecurity. let's say, security in general. For example, we see, let's say, young officers or cadets taking pictures of a ship transiting the Straits of Hormuz or being somewhere, you know, that they shouldn't do that because they give this piece of information to people that they shouldn't have it, for example. And of course, we have the emotional distraction. You know, you are anxious to talk home because you have this thing, and when, let's say, you are on watch and you are not allowed to, you're anxious. You say, you know, to finish my watch, to go to pick up the phone, to go on Facebook, on Instagram, to send a message on Messenger. And this actually is a destructive situation. So yes, connectivity is here to stay. It's going to become easier and cheaper for operators, because that was another thing. I remember back in 2010, for an hour, you used to pay, I don't know, $100, something like that, if I recall correctly. Nowadays, it's not that much, but still the cost is there. It's going to become cheaper. It's going to become, you know, more easily accessible. But we have to set, not the rules, but we have to set a frame on how we use it on board. I'm not talking about big data and technical data being sent to the company, because this is something that it happens and it will continue to happen, and actually doesn't affect seafarers' well-being in any case.
As I understand, you're talking about some sort of best practices of how to use it, more or less.
Yes, but we need to impose them sometimes. It's not only recommendation, is, you know.
Yeah, that's the fine line. Johanna, you would like to comment?
I just wanted to challenge Kostas a little bit, actually, because my thought when you mention it's an emotional disturbance when you have this type of connectivity, my immediate thought is, but is that kind of a cultural issue? Maybe, because it's also thinking about the research about this, that if you could share, and if you could, because it's a real situation, you will be aware of it anyway sometime. So if you could release that in some other way, then it would be a cultural thing, not the connectivity issue. So that was a challenge for you, Kostas.
Well, Johanna, thank you very much. You know, our industry is multinational. So some cultures, let's say, they're like that, and some cultures not like that. But we all know that especially younger people, the great part of their lives is, you know, is their phone, is the extension of them. You know what to do. They would like to share with the world what they do on moment, you know, on every other second. So this is challenging to be done on board. I don't mind at all, you know, whilst at the shore, you know, there is no problem, but having to navigate a vessel, having to load or to discharge cargo, or being in a very stressful situation, because being on board the ship, it is stressful itself. So having the opportunity, you know, I need my phone, I need to share this with somebody, I need to talk to somebody. This creates emotional stress, because sometimes you do not have the opportunity to have internet. Something happens and, you know, the equipment breaks down, or you have to do something that doesn't allow you, that doesn't give you time to do that. So you become stressed. This is my point.
Also, you have some nice points raised. I think the most provocative one is the last words you used in the previous take, when you said we have to see how to impose them. I think that's the most provocative out of what you said, but you have some nice points, valid points, absolutely. We've seen people across the globe having more or less these sort of, you know, considerations, because these are real life considerations. I mean, there are pros and cons, not necessarily, you know, everything has maybe more than two faces. Let's hear from Mads. Mads, your thoughts about the improved connectivity we have on board ships.
Yeah, it's a really interesting sort of opening to this discussion that we've heard already from Johanna and Kostas. And it's almost like there are two sides of connectivity, right? There's the social side of it, which is, I mean, very hard to argue against, even though I think you try a little bit, Kostas, and that's fair enough. And then there's the sort of the tech potential that arises from enhanced bandwidth we can do more with technology and so forth. And I'm not gonna, I mean, now we sort of talked a bit about what does it mean for people, the social aspects. I think you can also think about other things that could potentially be impacted about enhanced connectivity on board, social isolation, stuff like that. But I think, I mean, I would just like to skip to the other side of it, the sort of tech potential, because and back to, in a way, also the point that Johanna made initially, that we risk sort of overburdening or overwhelming seafarers with stuff that they don't necessarily need, just because we can, just because it's an opportunity or a possibility, because of the bandwidth that is increasing, fortunately in many ways. And I just wanted to sort of mention some smart words said by some guy in the past, which is referred to as something called Grudin's law, that states something like, when those who benefit are not those who do the work, then the solution is likely to fail or at least be subverted. And that's really something to keep in the back of our minds when we think about what to throw in the face of seafarers on board the ships.
Absolutely. Soma, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think if you look at connectivity today, right? I mean, I don't completely agree to the point to say the connectivity has actually improved tremendously across, because even in this decade of era of technology and connectivity that we are all working with, where we stay, I think it's still treated as a privilege of giving seafarers connectivity. And I have to say with absolute conviction that it is time for them to be given better connectivity, opportunity for them to connect back home in the way they can do, like any one of us do it currently. It is very important for that, because I think this is something which we should not deprive people out of it. And connecting back to the first question that you asked, Belokos, is how do you relate to pandemic and human factors, right? I think if not for the connectivity, many of the seafaring community wouldn't have stemmed through the pandemic challenge itself. Imagine a situation where you really didn't know what was going on at home, and you're on a ship sailing in the middle of the ocean, and you didn't have connectivity, and the pandemic situation kind of augmented the scenario, and the connectivity was the only thing that could have kind of helped seafarer to even come to know what was going on back home, right? I mean, I think that the connectivity angle, we need to look at it more from a little bit of empathy, a little bit of understanding of what is it meant for them, right? I mean, you need to look at it from a context of what is the purpose of it, rather than looking at it from an objective sense to say, does connectivity impose a distraction? It really doesn't. I mean, being a seafarer for many years, I lived through an era where there was no connectivity, and I also seen an era where there is connectivity. So I could really establish a difference. And I think seafarers, to a great extent, are smart enough to understand when to use and when not to use. So my take is that it is important that connectivity has to be there. And if we are talking about smart shipping going forward, connectivity definitely will augment that.
Absolutely. But again, you actually I think you have arrived safely to what Costa said. We need some sort of best practice, but we have to see how this will be imposed. So imposed may be a hard word, let's say, but it's a challenge. Absolutely, it's a challenge. Dimitri, your thoughts on this improved connectivity?
Thank you, Apostolos. Yeah, so I think that connectivity has much more advantages rather than disadvantages, especially nowadays. Yeah, so there's no doubt that internet on board is sufficient for the crew in terms of, especially in the times of the pandemics, where they can connect more with their families, especially when the companies couldn't replace people in time. Yeah, and there's so many ship owners, ship managers who were and still are providing free internet and even expanding the bandwidth for the crew members to be connected with their homes during pandemic times. This is absolutely required. But let's don't forget also that we're talking about the technology now. We're talking about the smart shipping, yeah? So if we want to bring the technology onto the vessels, it will definitely need proper connectivity. Yeah, because without connectivity, most of these smart apps will simply not work, And this is where connectivity is absolutely a must. And I see that there is a tendency that it's improving. Yeah. So as we discussed, the cost is not that, it's still quite expensive, but with years to come, it will become cheaper. The same like the, our mobile phones connectivity. Yeah. And all these smart things will be accessed through the internet on board. These could be also, as a representative of a training provider, I would say that the training experience for the crew can be massively improved as well in bringing on board these augmented reality or mixed reality, or even allowing a seafarer to log into his online account to do the training without the burden of exchanging the files, how it is recorded in the system, for further reporting and tracking. So I think this is very important. And all those disadvantages, which we also know, in my opinion, is related not only to cybersecurity, which is absolutely important, but also to the fatigue that we're not sure that the person before taking over the watch wasn't sitting and spending a lot of hours on the internet. But today, as far as I know, connectivity providers have very smart tools and applications which can help to control these activities and to minimize these risks as well. So that's also possible to control these things in terms of disadvantage.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, my next topic is about any sort of, troublesome development you see. We are moving towards an era of more autonomy in shipping. It's not only ships, it's ports, several stakeholders involved as well. Ships are using enough technology. We have a lot of equipment, modern technology, many challenges during this digitization era. Of course, I'm just asking, I would like to hear your thoughts on any specific trend that what you see is developing that we should, let's say, pay more attention, to put it in that sense. Any trend, we've seen a lot of good developments, a lot of, best practice developments. We've seen, for example, due to this, era, the push of, let's say, I would say the simulation via cloud. We've seen this happening over the course of the last year. A lot of service providers like, Big Yellow Fish and Scout Base introduced their services with respect to crew welfare. We've seen, on-board training, need training, and so on and so forth. And again, we've seen a lot of connectivity, and the list goes on and on and on, and telemedicine and so on. I'm asking of any specific trends that you should consider we should pay more attention to what is happening. Johanna, your thoughts, not necessarily bad things, but anything that we should pay more attention with your lens, let's say.
Thank you. It was a tough question, but there are many trends right now and there are many things to look at, of course. But one thing that I find really interesting is that we see many different skills coming into the maritime industry, different educational backgrounds and everything. And every one of those people need to work together to get this safe operation. So I found that really interesting also with the autonomous vessels and all this IT and OT development on ships. So that's interesting. And I also think about how do we do this best? Like we have this different educational background and we do this best with a nice group performance. So that brings to my mind also this we see now with this more talk about psychological safety and how to get the groups to work together and perform, and we will have this good and smooth operation. So that's an interesting trend. I like that.
Okay, thank you. Kostas.
Yes, well, I would say I would extend Johanna's thoughts, saying that soft skills are nowadays what are required, let's say nowadays, from seafarers, especially officers. And another thing that it may, be of importance in the future, technology brings less people on board. So I would say that the next decade or so, we're going to have big vessels having 5 to 10 crew members. on board only. So coming from different cultures, speaking different languages, having different educational backgrounds. So this may be, I don't know if it is a trend, we will see it in the future, this may contribute to more isolation, let's say, and more reliance on connectivity to talk to somebody than to be able to talk to somebody in front of you, in person. So, and as we all know, equipment in sea fail. So if we rely too much on that, I'm talking for the future, not nowadays, how people are going to be ready to deal with it, not technically, but emotionally, because they're going to be addicted, and they're not going addicted to connectivity and not having somebody in person to talk. These are, I'm thinking out loud about the future situation. This is something that we do not deal now. Yes, to my mind, connectivity is the best thing that ever happened on board ships. But again, it has to be framed somehow. I will not use the word imposed. So it has to be framed somehow. And people who go on board, they need to have the soft skills and the educational background to be able to use that for their profit and for the ship's profit.
I'm also skeptical, like yourself, on a number of issues. It has to do something with our age. We are not 20-something now. We are in the 30s, to put it in that sense. So above 30s. Okay. So I'm just, I'm thinking out loud. And, if we go back, let's say 10 years, we wouldn't have imagined all that, spectrum of technologies, of ideas that has come across the market and has been applied across shipping. So I'm sure we're going to be amazed by what the future holds for us. Maybe technology will allow for holograms, let's say, on board ships. Maybe technology will allow for some other, ideas. We have to wait and see. But I am amazed by the technology. I'm one of those who are, in favor of technology in any way, like yourself, and like I think all of us in this panel. But I think we should, I'm not saying we should, I'm just saying, let's say, we should be more, inventive when we try to see where the future goes, to put in that sense. We shouldn't frame our thoughts to what we know today, because the future, I think, it will amaze us. That's why. If we, I'm just giving you the example, if we go back, let's say 10 years, no one who had, let's say, guessed where we would be now. So I'm not asking you to guess where we will be in 8 years, because that's a very, abstract discussion. I'm talking about, real life trends. And I would like to have your take specifically on where we should focus on, not necessarily a bad development, it could be a good development, where we should focus our attention to. Mads, your thoughts?
Yes, let me just say that I also like technology for sure, but I think we need to not worship it. And there was a guy in the past, already back in the 50s, I think it was a guy called Norbert Wiener, who talked about being aware of gadget worshippers. So that's something to be aware of, I think. And what I think we should pay attention to is not necessarily, I mean, we're all fascinated by the idea of, let's say, autonomous ships. But going from where we are today to a fully autonomous world of shipping, it's not just some small steps, right? I mean, there's a big leap there. So what I think is more interesting, personally, as a technologist, to focus on also with my human factors sort of goggles on, is how can we incrementally move in the direction of that, if that's where we believe we want to go, and then ask ourselves what's the next step on the ladder, rather than skipping to already. It's almost like the idea of autonomous shipping is in our minds as it exists already, but in my mind there's a bit of weight. I mean, of course we can get ships to sail from A to B on their own. I mean, we've been able to do that for 40 years almost or something. That's not really the issue here, right? There's a lot of other stuff that we need to consider. And there's a lot of steps we can take to go in that direction. And maybe we will find out on the way there that, okay, we need to go in another direction because the sort of the sacred goal of an autonomous ship was maybe not where we needed to go. But if we focus more on how can we support people, how can we enhance the capability of the people who are doing work already, I think that's a trend towards it that I'm personally more interested in exploring.
Okay, thank you. Soma, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think what Matt's just mentioned is what I absolutely second that thought, because the way I look at technology, I'm a strong believer of technology and what it would do going forward. But most importantly, technology, to my understanding, is more of something that augments in human experience. It cannot replace the human experience. So that is something fundamentally that all of us should understand going forward. And to what Matt said, if all of us are, living under this umbrella saying that autonomous shipping will take over this world and, whatever is going to happen in the future. But that can only happen when you come to a point of singularity where the entire ecosystem would support it. And that's going to be a long shot. I mean, I would even call it a moonshot at this point in time. But what definitely can happen is those small steps towards augmenting the experience, bringing those efficiencies, which can help people improve their work culture on board, make things better for them. And if we can use technology to that extent, even make those baby steps, I think we have achieved a big thing. And I think that itself is taking a lot of time. And I think, Belokos, you did mention earlier that, when ECDIS came in, it took a long time for even people to bring people into that ecosystem of making them understand what ECDIS was and how to use ECDIS. And there was so much of resistance of people to say that, we were used to paper charts all these years, and to bring them into that ecosystem took years. So if you are looking at how technology can enhance life on board the ships, I think those small steps and small directions towards it matter. And I think that industry as a whole need to start taking those measures rather than taking those moonshots at, saying that I will completely replace something or I completely replace the human experience. It is practically not possible at this point in time, is my take.
Okay, thank you. Dimitri, your thoughts?
You mentioned the hologram. We just recently had an experience of connecting our customer's CEO with the crew audience in Manila, and the CEO was based in Cyprus, and it looked absolutely amazing. It was like in the movies from 80s, which is something unbelievable happening. And for sure, we're all on the side of the technology, and it is here, it is further developing, it is developing extremely fast these years. But also what we need to take into consideration that we are, let's say, take it in a balanced way, because it's very trendy to talk about autonomous ships, about automation, about this and that and that and that, and we shouldn't be led by just by how trendy it is to talk about that or implement it. It has to be really balanced in terms of, would it be helpful to the people on board, or can it distract the people on board? And in certain circumstances today, the equipment on board and the crew are taking it more negatively as the extra workload rather than supporter. And in certain cases, we need to prove to the crew that, look, this is working in your favor. So I think a lot of research should be still taken here in order to, before implementing massively the technology on board the ships.
Okay, thank you. Now it's time to, let's say, wrap up the panel. My last, let's say, question, the last topic, I would like to sum up your thoughts. I would like to ask you to pick one thing, give you, let's say, the opportunity to pick one thing that would have either an immediate or a profound impact that would improve, let's say, human factors in the smart shipping era. I would like to ask you to sum up your thoughts and pick one thing. What would you pick and why? That would have either an immediate or a profound impact, let's say, to boosting, improving, let's say, human factors in the smart shipping era. Johanna, your thoughts to wrap up the panel.
Thank you. I will try to. Very interesting discussion, and I also totally agree with Mads last saying that we don't fancy technology that much that we have to do everything at once. And actually, I want to talk about that in our closest future, I see we have to balance two human biases. One is fear of change, and another is rush to solve bias. Fear of change is a very common human bias that keeps people and businesses from taking necessary steps forward. But in these hasty times when we have, for example, need very fast solutions, for example, to keep the CO2 level down and other fast decisions, there is also a risk for the rush to solve bias, where we do changes without backing them up with facts. And then we also compromise safety. And there is a well-known solution to both biases, and that is for businesses to work like researchers. You experiment with one small change at a time and adapt on the way forward. And I think Mads also explained a lot about that and so on as well. So I think that is the way to go.
Thank you. Kostas?
Well, that was very interesting what Johanna mentioned, and I totally agree with her. Being a seafarer and being more practical, though, I would say that what we need to focus on is soft skills for the seafaring community, and you know, to educate them more, try to in the schools, in the universities, maritime universities, to input these you know, skills as well, not only technical and marine and navigational, in order to make them to make them better, to cope with the situation that grows.
Thank you, Kostas. Mads, your thoughts?
Yes, one thing that I would like to see from shipping organizations is the change of a role. And in most companies, that would probably be the HSEQ role. I would like to change that from being a police function to a support function, and more specifically, a support function that tries to understand and accommodate human needs in terms of seafarers, acknowledging that the seafarers are essentially the guys making money for the company, and they needed to be treated as well so they can perform as well as possible. That would be my statement here.
Thank you. Soma?
Yeah, my take would be, you know, the aspect of engagement, like I started earlier. I mean, I think it's very important that whatever the industry does going forward, and especially the companies that do for the seafarers, it's important to bring the layer of engagement, making them understand for the purpose for which they're doing this. I mean, it's very important to put it across and bring the layer of engagement, whether it is safety, whether it is training. People have to engage onto that. I think that the biggest missing link is we've been putting it across without connecting the dot of engagement. And more importantly, bring an element of relevance of why they're doing it and recognize for what they're being done. So these two are very important factors, in my opinion. Engage your people well, bring a sense of relevance of why they're doing it, and recognize their efforts for what they've done. And I think that will, I think, nail the brief for any seafarer anywhere working. And all these efforts of safety, everything would be achieved through that process. That would be my take. Yeah.
Thank you. And Dimitri?
Just to add to what Matt said, yeah, I totally agree that today, you know, the superintendents, be technical or marine superintendents or SKE, they have to start working, you know, doing a kind of policing, but they have to work in the team with the seafarers on board. And today's technology allows to do this, because I mean, with all these smart applications like live streaming over the, you know, overhauling of the main engine, or I don't know, cargo operation during when the crane is moving, you know, collecting the cargo. This makes it more and more possible. So that's again connected with the technology. And on the other side, I would say that I would rather consider also to review the general training requirements for the crew. So today, STW stipulates only, you know, like a basic minimum training requirements to the people. If we want to bring technology to the ships, it has to be totally reconsidered, and I think it has to be much wider in terms of training standards and requirements.
Absolutely, and thank you for mentioning that. We have the latest STW. The discussion, I think, started back in 2005, if I recall correctly, and it was voted back in 2010 in Manila, with implementation dates starting from the 2012. So it's time now to revisit the STCW under the light of the recent developments and the technology in place. Absolutely, and we're going to see more on the technology front in the years to come, absolutely. Having said that, I would like to thank you all very much. Very insightful feedback and food for thought for us and of course our viewers. I would like to thank our viewers for staying with us during the course of the 2 days. The streams will remain online on the same links. So for those who would like to revisit any sort of panel discussion or presentation, the feed is going to be there. I would like to thank our sponsors. I would like to thank you all for participating and attending the 2022 SMART4SEA Virtual Forum. We expect within the year to resume these live events. Till then, we'll stay online. Thank you all very much, and we'll be in touch in the future. Thank you all very much. Bye-bye.